Good morning, everybody. Caught me unawares then. Anyway, so where we're up to with the box. There's a lot of major work that we do with boxes where we're cutting timber to size, we're dressing timber, we're cutting joints, and we're building a whole complete carcass of a box. The thing that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of thought as well is all the little bits and pieces around the box. Now, the little things, I mean things like hinging, things like inlays, things that you use to enhance the box. So what we're going to do today is going to spend a little bit of time fiddling around with some of that sort of stuff. So it's not going to be something where we're going to build this monstrosity or this large item. We're just going to do a lot of the smaller stuff that goes around the box. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is continue from last week. Now, last week we cut the rebate, or dado as people call it, for our little inlays. Okay, so we're going to fit all of that sort of stuff. Then we're going to round over the edges. Now, the reason I'm going to round the edges over is because I want to match up with something where we've highlighting the rounding over of the feet. Okay, so we want something on the bottom of the box like it's rounded over, something on the top of the box that's rounded over as well, so the rounding over of the edge. Now, that doesn't always work, but we're going to give it a go anyway, so we'll see how we go with it. The other thing that doesn't always work is having the inlays. Now, this frame, we've already done that. This is my tester that I did right at the beginning. It's actually turned out to be quite a nice lid, which might end up getting used for our current box. But we'll see how this one looks when we've got it done. Different material on the inside panel, but we'll see how it goes. With the other box that we're making, we've got a piece of black art sassafras, but we've got no framework in there, right? So it's going to stay plain because there's a fair bit of feature in that piece of black art sassafras. So it looks nice on the outside, whether we have that way up, or we have it that way up, or we use the back of it. So we can do whatever we like with it. So there's a few things that we can do to make it look pretty nice on the box without having to add things or round over edges and so forth. So that will be something that we'll look at down the track. But today, let's get this sorted. The other thing that we want to do is, I just want to give you a little taster. We're going to have a look at that. Now, there's lots of different types of hinges there. Now, we're not going to fit any hinges today, but I'm going to talk about the hinges. I was asked through the week about fitting the 5mm pin hinges. I'm going to we'll have a little discussion about that as well. So this could be interesting for some people. I don't profess to be an expert on hinging and the types of hinges and things like that, but I do know what I like, and I do know how to fit the things that I do like. So we'll go through that in a minute. Then I'm going to use a couple of pieces of material here. This is the other thing that we're going to do. I've got a piece of cedar and a piece of silver ash, and we're going to hand make the pull knob for the drawer. So we're going to show you how to do that as well. So a little bit to do today, a little bit of fun. We'll get through as much as we can, and we'll try and get a fair bit done so that you've got at least something to work with over the week before we have our next show. So we want to fit these. Now, first thing I need to do is just to make sure it's nice and clean. Now, find a sharp implement and just make sure that you haven't got any little bits of sawdust or nicks and scratches in the edges. All I'm doing there is just taking out the furry bits, because cedar is very bit furry. So what I need to do now, I've cut my strips to 1/8 of an inch, and that's the same size as that. Now, for those of you who didn't see it last week, the router bit that I used to cut it was the TSRW4, which is our Carby tool one, and it's a 1/8 router bit, just a spiral bit. I'll just take it out of the pack for you. So that's what the router bit looks like. It's just a small tiny router bit. I find it adequate for doing the small stuff that I do, the inlays that I do. But yeah, you can make it as big or as small as you like. So just by choosing the correct router bit. I have a variety of these router bits, like I've got 5 or 6 different sizes. So I can mix and match and do whichever bits I like. So now what we're going to do is fit our long edges. Now I'm going to do the long edges first, because we've got rounded corners. Don't know if you can get that in there, Pammy. You can see we've got rounded corners because we used a round router bit. It's round on the corner. So what we need to do with the end of the piece of material, which is already cut square, is to round over that edge. Now you can use a sander if you like. I tend to do this, and I do this first. So just round over the edge and just fit it in there to see if it fits nice. So that's going to fit in there quite nicely, and then we cut it to size. Now I tend to cut these to size as I need them, not all at once. If you cut them all at once, there's a chance that you'll pick up the wrong one and put it in the wrong place. So I'm going to fit them one at a time. Now what I've done here, if you look down close here, you can see what I've done. I've pushed that right up into the corner here, and I've marked it there, and it's just, the mark is just a little bit over the length because I want it to fit in there nice and tight. So we'll take that out and we'll cut that to size. Now cutting to size, there's all sorts of different methods that you can use. I've got a cutting board here, and I'm just using one of these little Japanese tools. There's razor saw Japanese tools sell, and if you want a saw that's similar to this one here, it's a pull saw. And you don't need very much pressure with this saw. So these are from Japanese tools. You can get them from Japanese Tools in Sydney. Really nice saw. And now we just fit. So I've already rounded that over there. Did you do both ends? I've done one end. Right. Okay, so now what I have to do is round over the other end. And as you can see, it's not quite fitting. It's going to be a little bit snug. So now what we do is we round over the other end. So again, with the sandpaper. And you can see I've just rounded that over there. Make sure you do the right side, of course. And you can see that is quite a snug fit. And I can just pop that in and just glue that in place. Okay, so that's what I will do straight away. I had a piece of scrap and some glue. These are the things that take a lot of time with your boxes. If you're making a box that's going to become an heirloom, or it's going to become a special piece for someone for some reason, then some of these little things actually give the box a little bit of class. You don't always have to do this sort of stuff. It's just a personal choice thing. Now I'm going to put in a reasonable amount of glue. I'm not too concerned if I get some on the outside of at this stage. What I'm trying to do is just make sure that all the area in the dado or in the channel, at least it has a smear of glue on it. Where's my piece? There it is.
I think doing this fine stuff could be quite enjoyable.
If you have a lot of patience, and I know some people don't have patience when it comes to building things, this can be a very satisfying process. Just wipe off my excess. Now, while that's drying, what I'm going to do is this. I'm just clamping it to the bench. Do it this way, so that's nice and clamped in place. We can work on this bit while this one's drying. So now I get my second piece. And repeat the process. Round over the edge. Mark the end. This is really nice when there's a quiet time. Fits in there quite nicely. So now it's a little bit of glue. And in the time that I've spent just making this piece, my glue has dried sufficiently so that I can actually take the clamps off the other side. Press that into place. Take the clamps off that side. Turn it around. Put the clamps in this side. You can put as many of these clamps on as you like. I've actually got some little ones that I often use like this. These are tiny little ones. They actually, if I want to do a lot, I can just put those on there. It does exactly the same job. So that one there is glued in place nicely. I think I better wipe off the excess before I go too far. Don't overdo the glue, but that doesn't really matter anyway because it's going to end up getting sanded in the end. I might just use the little ones. Put the big ones away.
Gives a more even kind of
Yeah.
pressure, doesn't it?
Yeah, as Pammy was just saying there, you get a bit more of an even pressure when you lay them out. Okay. And now we want to do this one here. Now these have to be square because we've rounded over these ends here. So those ends come around the corner and we need to be square into there. So that piece will be square. So you don't have to round that over. So just cut the end of it square. Just go careful when you do this. You won't be splitting the timber. We have a nice square butt joint. And we mark this. Now, just add the tiniest little bit of extra material there so there's a bit of pressure on it when you fit it. As well as that, if you happen to chip it, you've got something to remove. Okay, so that's going to fit in there beautifully. And you can see we have a nice clean butt joint. Now they're sitting up a little bit at the moment, but we're going to plane those off in a second. We'll actually let it dry first before we plane it, but hopefully we'll get it done today. A little bit of glue in there.
To know, do you have a particular supplier for your glue brush?
Anywhere where you can find them cheap. Paul? I find them at Bunnings, Officeworks, the dollar shop. Anywhere where you can find them. They're actually quite difficult to find in some places. Art supplies have them, but they're generally a little expensive because they generally have sable hair, and sable hair brushes are probably a lot more expensive than these cheaper nasties that we use here. I tend to use brushes quite a lot with stuff, and they don't last very long at all. So I tend to have a sort of a mentality, whereas the one-use brush works fine. It's now, I hope you're all paying attention here. There will be questions later. Okay, so now we've just got one more to do. Nice and square. Beautiful. Paul, the glue brushes can be used over and over again. I just let them sit in the water. But when it comes to using finish brushes, that's a different story. Wipe off the excess, or a little bit of the excess while we're doing it. Nice. I'm quite pleased with that. This one's been dry enough. I didn't overdo the glue. I didn't put lots and lots of glue in, so it's going to take only take a short period of time. I'm just going to put this aside because I want to do another task while that's drying, and then we'll come back to this one. So I just want to put clamps on here. Can you come in over here, Penny? So all I'm doing there is I'm just putting this aside, and you can see that it sticks up quite a bit. So I'm going to plane all of that off, and but in the meantime I'm just going to let that sit there and dry, because we're going to use this table here to do our handles. Now, handles are again another thing that is personal choice stuff. So we need to sort of have a think about what sort of handles we're going to have. The box itself so there's nothing to grab hold of here. Now there's a number of different types of handles. You saw in the last box that I made where I turned the draw pulls. We could do that. We could put we could turn a quite a large one, but we need something that's a little bigger than the small draw pulls that I made last time. So I got on the lathe the other day and I made this little thing here, which again, experimenting. So it's just a little thing, and like of course you drill 2 holes, you stick that in there, and that becomes your draw pull. But it looks out of place. It looks pretty, yeah, not the thing I want to do. So I've decided to make a different type. Now, the technique that I'm going to use is one that I've sort of had a little play with in the past. It's again something that I do with my boxes. It's not something that I see around commercial areas. Often when you see commercial stuff, you'll see nice brass ones or silver, chrome, lots of other different types of materials. You generally don't see handmade ones that suit the style of the box that you're making. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to make one that suits the box, and one that I actually sort of spending a bit of time developing, and we're going to go with that. So while that's sitting there, before we do that, I want to round over the edge of this just to show you exactly what it does, what we do, because the process of making the handle is going to include these types of tools. So the router bit that I'm going to use to round over that edge, we'll do that first, is the round over bit that I actually we have in our kit, in our master cutter kit. So it's only a 1/4 inch round over. You can use a larger one if you like. I've got one here that's a little bit bigger. You can see it's got a bigger radius in the curve. This one's only a 1/4. I can't remember what that is, about 5/8, something like that. But we're not going to use that one. We use the smaller one. Now I'm going to set this at bench height. I'll just use my ruler to do that. What I don't want is I don't want a little step on the top or the bottom of the box. I just want the corner rounded over. All right. Now, so that's pretty much ready to go now. When you look at the jointing on this box, on this lid, you'll see that off the corner of here, here, back here and here, you can see there's end grain there and there. Now, if you cut all the way down this side here, and then afterwards you cut across there and cut across the end grain, there's a high chance that you're going to end up with chip out here where you've rounded it over. If you do this one first, if you cut across here first, and you do chip over, take a bit off there because the grain runs this way, of course, then you can pick up that tear out when you cut along the grain this way, okay, and it will remove any damage that you may have caused. The other alternative is to put a push block behind here that actually stops that from tearing out. So you can do that as well. So let's get this started. So I'll just make sure I've got everything locked here. Just make sure I've got my switch off. And earmuffs. So ears on, everybody. You can see there's a little bit of tear out there which will be picked up by the cut that goes along the edge there. Okay, so I'm just having a look at that. That's got a nice little round over. It's not too sharp. So we'll continue around. I'll do the other end as well. So what that's done with the box, it's taken the sharpness off the lid, and now it blends better with the box. That's my opinion anyway. It just looks that little bit nicer where you haven't got this sharp edge showing all the way around the box. what I could do is I could round over the corners there, but I won't do that. I'll leave that sharp there because it's got sharp corners on here. If I rounded over that there, I would round over this here, but I'm not going to do that. I just think the box doesn't need that sort of thing, so that would probably go that way if I was going to put it on there. And then I put a little keeper over the top of these two holes that I've got here. These two little holes are borer holes, and we could cover those over by a little keeper or a little lifter that goes on there. So as you can see, now the box sort of blends together. It becomes a little bit more, I'm thinking of the word sanguine, but I don't think that fits. But anyway, it looks a little bit nicer than it did before. So I've got this one to do, and I've got another one to do, but I won't do the other one just at the moment. What I want to do is I want to go onto this little handle. So I've got half an hour left, so the handle will take a little bit of fiddling around with. So what do we do with the handles? Do we make them out of cedar? Do we make them out of silver ash? For this box, I could probably make it out of silver ash and it'll look nice, but as you can see, indecision is taking over here. So if I was looking at this box, what would I put on this one? Now, I couldn't use silver ash, basically because I've got no silver ash showing on the outside of the box. But what I could do is I could pick up some of the colours in the black heart sassafras and maybe make an ebony one, or an ebony, or the lighter grey, which that grey would be very similar to coachwood. Okay, so coachwood is a sort of a greyish sort of colour. So I could pick up some of that colours and make the keeper and the handle out of that, but we'll keep that one for afterwards, and I'll show you that when we're ready to go. But this is how I make the handles. So I've got two pieces of timber here. I'm going to make two of them. The two pieces of material, this is the same as the cedar on the boxes, and of course this is the same as the silver ash on the lid. That's the offcut. So they are just offcuts, so that's all we need to do. So this is how I make them. So let's go through that. I want to try and get this done so that I can show you how I plane off the excess off the lid inlay. So ears on. Our first task is to round over the edge. So you can see I've just got rounded over edge. My next task is to cut a groove down here, somewhere where you can put your fingers in to actually hang on to it. Right? Now the router bit I'm going to use for that is the box core bit, which also comes in our kit. Now you can make these as big and as small, or as small as you wish. It's up to you. And the box core bit. Core box bit. How deep you make this is dependent on how much you want to take out of here. Right? So I'm only going to take a small amount out, not very much at all. and I will need a fence. Might need to come around here, Penny. Sit that square to my fence. Now I've got to work out how far in I want to come from the edge. So about 10 millimetres to the centre of the router bit should be sufficient. We'll try it on this one, and if it doesn't work we can turn it over and use the other side. Need a clamp and my push block. So this time you will need your push block. Lock everything in, ears on. So I've cut a groove in there, and now that's probably too deep, which isn't going to work very well at all. So put that one aside. Well, we're in the right distance. I just got to drop that down a little bit more. Try the white one. Bit more. Too far. Try that. Okay. That one's a little better. Now, for two reasons. Number one, it's a bit more shallow. And number two, because we're going shallower, we've got less of a distance between here and here. Whereas this one here is quite wide. Okay, so that's a bit too much. So, now I'll do the other side. So that looks quite nice now, and you can grab hold of this to pull the drawer in and out. Now the reason I'm using a large piece of timber like that, it's a little bit safer. As you can see, I'm fiddling around here close to a router bit, and I need to have things nice and safe. So the idea is to have something that's relatively large, and then we'll cut it down to size as we need it. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dock off a piece, or this piece here. So we'll go over to the drop saw. I'm not going to measure it because the measurements are a visual thing for this type of handle. Just want a little bit more. Okay, so dock that off. There we go. And so now I have a little handle. Now, I could put that on there and have a big, long, wide thing, but that looks a little bit odd. So what I need to do is I need to dock that to size. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to round over one end of it, right? And that way it will have a nice curve on it, and then we'll dock it to size and round the second end. So on the sander, now let's work out how wide we want this. So we bring the box over. So how wide do we want that, considering it's that big? Smaller or larger? What do you reckon?
Turn the box on its back.
Okay. That's a good idea. Okay, so now we just have to work out how long we want this thing to be. So, smaller?
No.
So about that wide?
Yeah, that's a good starting point.
Okay, let's dock it off there.
Gary reckons 35 mil.
35 mil. Why 35 mil, Gaz? So that's 35 mil to there. Maybe a bit longer.
I think start a bit longer.
Oh, I might start like let's go to where I had it before.
Go to 50 mil.
50 mil.
That's just a starting point.
As a starting point. We can always dock it down anyway.
I think 50 mil will be good.
So we're on 60 at the moment, so I'll dock that down at 60,
Yeah.
and then we'll go from there. Okay, so over to the drop saw. I could use the Japanese saw for this, but so what do we reckon?
Yeah.
Does that look about right? You only need one or two fingers to open the drawer.
Yeah.
You're probably right there, Gaz. But anyway.
It's also about the proportion, about the inlay.
Yeah, as Pammy was saying, it's all about the proportion of the inlay as well. So we've got an inlay that's this long, we've got that. So to my sander. What do you reckon about that? Okay, so that adds a little bit of proportion to it as well. So we're going to add that.
And it's
Okay.
going to be recessed too, so it won't be as bulky.
Yeah. So we've got a little bit of work to do to that. So we'll keep that aside for the moment. What I want to do is I want to just go back to this other one that we had started and plane a little bit of material off. So Unfortunately, we probably won't get to the hinge discussion, but we could leave that for another day anyway. So planing this off. Just going to put a couple of stops here. I'll just hold that on there, and then we will just plane off our excess. Now this will take a little time. At least I've shown you the technique that I use to get this. Now silver ash is relatively hard, so you just need to be a little careful. Make sure you don't bash into the top edge there when you're planing this off. You can plane a little bit at a time. Those Shirley Temple shavings we had the other week. Nice little plane this, the Veritas low angle block plane. Does a really nice job. And we're not having to use two hands or anything like that. You can do the whole lot with one hand, so you don't need a large plane for it. And you can see I'm working around the thing. I'm not actually trying to take it all the way down on one piece. I'm working around our job. There's some people say, oh, well, why can't you just make that thinner so you're not having so much to take off? The problem with working with thin in some cases, and it doesn't always happen, but in some cases, it's just very awkward to cut, very awkward to plane, very awkward to glue, because you've got very small amounts of things to hang on to. And you'll find that people with inlays will probably agree with you that when they're fiddling around with doing little inlays and things around jobs, and we just keep working around until such time as we get rid of all of the excess. getting down there now. It's nearly there. I'm just took a little bit of off the edge there. Getting close. So we're looking like we're getting somewhere. So keep at it until we get it right. A little bit more there. Here. Okay, so that's all the planing. Now it's just a matter of doing a little bit of sanding. So I've got a number of different grades here. So piece 240. I'm going to start with 240 and my sanding block. And just go careful and see if that works. If that gives you the result you need, well then of course continue. If you can't get the result you want, go to a coarser grade sandpaper. So I had a piece 100 here somewhere. There it is. Now, if you're going to 100 or something coarser, just be careful you don't take too much off the surface of your lid. And remember, work with the grain where you can. Don't need lots and lots of pressure, just light pressure. Now all that glue that was on there before is now gone. The stuff we left on it. One of the difficulties you have with adding a hardwood to a softwood is that when you sand, the softwood will sand away quickly and the hardwood won't, which will leave it a little bit of a ridge on it. So you need to be very careful about that when you're sanding. We're looking good now. Back to my 240. If you want, you could get a scraper out and you could scrape the surface off it. That will give you quite a nice finish, and I'll keep it flat. When you're using the coarse paper, you always work down through the grades. This one here is 240. I'll go to 320 afterwards, just to remove the scratches that are left by the coarser grade. It's looking really nice. And you can see I've got quite a reasonable result just from a small amount of work. I'll continue with this after the show and get it to a standard that looks pretty nice on the box. Remember, this is the top of the box, so you've got to make sure that you get it right. Now, one of the good things about this is if you have any little gaps, particularly in your corners or anything like that, one of the tricks that I use to actually fix that is while I'm sanding, I can't actually see any, but I'll show you what I do. I'll put a little bit of super glue in the gap, and you can see there's a whole lot of sawdust on there. So what it will help the colour. So get an old bit of sandpaper, and then while it's wet, sand it. And what will happen is you'll sand the super glue. You can see it on the paper there. You'll see that super glue, you'll sand the super glue off the top, but the stuff that's in the crack, if there is a crack, will still be wet. And when you fill it full of sawdust, it will hide the crack because you've got sawdust the same colour as the surface that you're sanding. You may need to change your sandpaper a couple of times, but that's just a neat little trick to hide any cracks or splits. Or.
And Cole, tell us what's the finest, what paper will you go down to?
When I'm sanding by hand, I will be sanding right down to 500 grit for the top of the box, and then before I put a finish on it, I'm going to sand 800 and then probably some 1200 before I actually put the finish on. So when it comes to putting the finish on, I'll go through that process and give you a bit of an idea of actually how I go about it and what I do with it. My way is probably not the same as everybody else, but we'll see how we'll see when the time comes. So that will happen down the track. At the moment, we just got to get the box finished. So that's where we'll end it today. I didn't get onto the hinges, unfortunately, but next week we'll be dealing with a bit of hinge work, and so we'll see what we can do about the types of hinges that we can use. Okay, so we'll just stop there and carry on with it next week. So I hope you enjoyed today. We went around a few little things. We did just some small stuff, and unfortunately the small stuff does take time, so it's just a matter of having some patience with it. Do what you can by hand. If you can't make the piece yourself, by all means look around some of the commercial places where you can buy hinges and various other knobs and draw pulls and bits and pieces, and just see what it's about. And if there's something that suits, well, by all means go with it, and because it's basically it's your project, so whatever it does, whatever happens to it in the end is up to you. So I hope you enjoyed today. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe, and we'll give you a hoy next week, and we'll continue next Sunday. So have a good one, folks, and I will see you all next week.